I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons, my Bibliosprand, Bibliohowlers, and Bibliomancers. Thank you so much for supporting my hobby and passion even more. It means so much to me. Hi everyone, Petrik here. I hope that you had a lovely Christmas, and it is that time of the year. It is time to talk about all the best books of 2022, or to be more precise, it's time to talk about all the best books that I read within this year. Now, I have planned to actually post this video much sooner, and I know that this is very late into the year. We're almost at 2023, only a few days before we enter the year 2023. But I wanted to finish one massive fantasy book first. Well, I wanted to finish more, but I'm only capable of finishing one because I'm confident that this book would be included in my list of favorite books this year. And yes, I will be talking about that book in this video as well. And speaking of being late in posting this best books of 2022 video, unfortunately I have to postpone my updated completed fantasy series video. I will have to postpone that to the month of January instead, because I want to finish at least one more series before I post that video. And honestly, I underestimated just how busy this month of this year would be. I just didn't expect that the holiday season this year would be this busy. But anyway, I apologize for delaying this video and also that updated completed fantasy series video. And I hope you will still enjoy watching this video and that video when it's posted. Now, before we get to the main list, let's talk a bit first about statistics and also the rules that will be implemented on this list. So at the time of posting this video, on Goodreads, I recorded a total of 227 books being read within this year, and a total of 69,000 pages long. Now, before you get completely shocked by this number of quantity, I want to make it clear first, only about 65 of them, 64 or 65, are novels. The rest are manga, manhwa, or some graphic novels. For the first time in 6 years, I have decided to record the number of manga volumes that I read within a year. And that's exactly why the quantities of books I read within this year exploded. But if we're speaking exclusively about the number of novels that I read within a year, well, unfortunately, I have to say that 2022 is my lowest performance. But hey, I will not regret this. It is, after all, an incredibly busy year for me. But anyway, enough about the introductions. Let's talk about the rules implemented on this list. First, like always, this list contains all the books that I read within this year. So they are not books exclusively published this year. Secondly, if there are multiple favorite books in the series, I will still only include one book in that series on this video and list. And the third and final rule being implemented on today's video, every book in the top 15 books, I gave them a rating or at least 4.5 stars, rounded up on Goodreads, or 5 out of 5 stars rating. In other words, they are included in my list of favorite books. However, before I talk about the top 15 novels that I read in the year 2022, I would like to talk about 2 honorable mentions and also 2 favorite novellas. So I guess technically this is a top 19 best books of the year for me. So first, let's talk quickly about 2 honorable mentions. These are for the 2 books that I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars rating on Goodreads, but I didn't round up the rating. They are just slightly short on making it on the list of my favorite books this year. And these 2 books are, the first one is The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is the second book in the Bloodsworn Saga series, and I know what you're thinking right now. For the first time since 2017, this is the first time I didn't include John Gwynne's book in my list of favorite books. But well, I have to be honest, I am slightly disappointed by Hunger of the Gods, and I know that this is an incredibly unpopular opinion. I'm a huge John Gwynne fan. I've been talking and praising John Gwynne's books since, well, the year 2017 non-stop, and I will still keep doing that. But I also will have to be honest that The Hunger of the Gods didn't work as much as I hoped for me. And it is my unpopular opinion that even though I really love this book, I still love this book. After all, I gave it a 4.5 stars rating. But I, right now, consider this John Gwynne's weakest novel in comparison to his other books. But again, I'm confident that the third and final book in the Bloodsworn Saga series will deliver an incredibly satisfying conclusion to the trilogy, because I think John Gwynne usually is excellent and the best at writing the final book of his series. And the second and last honorable mention will go to Until the Last by Mike Shekel. This is the conclusion to the Last War trilogy, which now has become one of my favorite completed fantasy trilogy, even though a character named Petrik actually appeared in this book. But comparatively, I think the first 2 books are better than Until the Last. There were some really great parts in Until the Last, but I think the main and final villain of this book and the entire trilogy proved to be a bit disappointing to me. I feel like after every harsh things that happen, it is kind of disappointing that, in my opinion, the main villain didn't feel as terrifying as all the other villains in the trilogy. But other than that, Until the Last is still a great book, a great concluding installment to the Last War trilogy. So that's the end of the honorable mentions section. Now let's talk about the favorite novellas that I read in the year 2022, and I have 2 novellas on this list. Just like honorable mentions, I have 2 novellas on this list. And the first one, I think some of you know about this already, and this will have to be The Jet Setter of Janloon by Fonda Lee. This is the prequel novella to the main Greenbone Saga series, and I love everything about it. And I know that I am super biased. I am super biased about everything related to the Greenbone Saga because I consider the Greenbone Saga to be the best completed fantasy trilogy that I've read. And I know that I have mentioned plenty of times that this novella would work amazingly well for newcomer or readers who have read the Greenbone Saga series, the main Greenbone Saga series. But I personally think that The Jade Setter of Janloon, the experience of reading this novella will be enhanced only after you have read the main trilogy, because just from reading the main trilogy, seeing the characters in the main trilogy appearing in this novella, even though their appearance were relatively really short, they were super satisfying already. And yes, a few of my favorite characters in the Greenbone Saga actually appeared in this novella in their younger state. And I love The Jet Setter of Janloon. And the other best novella will have to be The Exile by Ryan Cahill. This is not only the best novella that I read this year, it is one of the best novella that I've read. I think it is utterly impressive that Ryan Cahill managed to pack so many content into this novella, or to be more precise, this is a short novel, really. But this novella focuses upon a character that I cherish in the Bound and the Broken series. The name of the character is Dane Arteris, and I consider Dane to be my favorite character in the entire Bound and the Broken series so far, and it is so good. It is so good to actually see and read an entire novella depicting his background story and an entire book told from his perspective. It is just so good. If you check the average rating for The Exiles on Goodreads, you will see an impressive number, and it is well deserved. So that's the end of the honorable mentions and also the favorite novella section. Now let's talk about the best 15 novels that I read this year. And at the number 15 spot, and yes, this will be ranked, at the number 15 spot, it is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a self-published fantasy book. It used to be a self-published fantasy book, now traditionally published, that has taken the fantasy genre by coffee and calmness. And yes, I think this is the wholesome and cozy fantasy book that a lot of fantasy readers would love. The characters are very cherishable, and I know that this belongs in the slice of life genre, but personally, slice of life has always been one of my favorite subgenre to read in manga and also watch in anime. But for fantasy novels, I have never read a great slice of life fantasy novel until I met Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. And suffice to say that, as it turns out, a lot of people loved it. And yes, this is one of my favorites as well. Moving on to the next one, at the number 14 spot is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This is the first book that I read this year, and yes, it stays strong as one of my favorites this year. Actually, not only one of my favorites this year, but this is one of my favorite standalone novels. If you have watched my list of favorite standalone novels, updated list, you will see that Spinning Silver, surprisingly, is included in that list. And I know that I have talked many times that I hated Uprooted, but I cannot deny that I love Spinning Silver. This is beautifully written, even though it is told from the first-person narration of multiple perspectives. It was handled incredibly well. The characters are so well realized, and somehow I can truly feel the coldness of the setting. It is amazing to read during winter, or maybe if you live in a tropical country just like me, well, read it during summer, and you can magically feel the coldness of the wintry season from reading Spinning Silver. Amazing book, amazing standalone novel. And at the number 13 spot is The Knights of Verador by Philip C. Quinchell. This is the 7th book in the Echo Saga series, the 9 books Echo Saga series. And well, to be honest, the 9th book in the series, A Clash of Fates, is the reason why I'm postponing my favorite completed fantasy series video, because I want to make sure that I finish A Clash of Fate first. And I'm reading A Clash of Fates right now, and there is a good chance there's a really good chance that The Clash of Fates will become my favorite book in the entire series. And if that happens, I will update this list in the pinned comment. But for now, I would just say that The Knights of Erador, not including A Clash of Fates, is my favorite books in the series so far. It is the beginning of the final trilogy in the 9-book series, and I think it really raised the stakes of the series. And once again, I will say this once more, I highly recommend the Echo Saga series to those of you who love reading a classic fantasy told in a modern voice. It is such a fun and entertaining series, and I think I can safely recommend this to many fantasy readers. And speaking of classic fantasy told in a modern voice, well, the next book on this list is Age of War by Michael J. Sullivan. So I've read the entirety of the Legends of the First Empire. If I have to choose one out of the 6 books, I will have to choose Age of War. I think this one, the conclusion to the first half of the Legends of the First Empire, is the best book of the series, and it is also the first time that I felt that Michael J. Sullivan can really write big action scenes. I never thought that it was possible from Michael J. Sullivan just from reading the Rhyria books. But I have been proven wrong in Age of War, and yes, out of every book in the series, this one is the best one. Don't get me wrong, the last 3 books in Legends of the First Empire were great, but well, I have some issues with some of them. I will talk about them again in my December wrap-up. At the number 11 spot, it is a true classic fantasy, and this one is Lord of Chaos by Robert Jordan. This is the 6th book in the Wheel of Time series. And well, I know that some of you might be thinking that, what? The Wheel of Time book only in the number 11 spot? Well, it is more shocking that a book in the Wheel of Time is included in my list of favorites, especially if you're familiar with my Goodreads review, because I have voiced my immense disappointment from reading The Shadow Rising, the 4th book in the series, which is considered by many fans of the Wheel of Time to be the best book in the series. And that book has stopped me from continuing the Wheel of Time for 2 years. And thankfully, this year I have decided to continue. Both The Fires of Heaven and Lord of Chaos, both of them were great. And Lord of Chaos is my favorite book in the series so far. It is filled with many iconic moments, and it made me excited to continue with the series, even though I know that I'm going to be reading the slog portion of the Wheel of Time series, book number 7 until book number 10. They are very famous for being the slog of the series. But I will do my best to continue with the series because I really want to get to reading the final 3 books written by Brandon Sanderson in the Wheel of Time series. But for now, I will just say that Lord of Chaos is Robert Jordan's best work that I've read, and I loved it. And now we're entering the top 10 spot. At the number 10 spot is Locklands by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the 3rd and final book in the Founders trilogy, and well, it is confirmed that this has become one of my favorite trilogies. I know that quite a lot of readers are kind of disappointed with Locklands. Whether they liked it or not, they consider Locklands to be the weakest of the trilogy, but I disagree. I somehow love this one. It is very high concept in its action scenes. Some of the battles that happen in Locklands felt like they were taken out of the Dragon Ball Z manga or anime, but well, I love them. I think the over-the-top battles in Locklands were so engaging to read, and the ending, even though it was bittersweet, it was also so satisfying. So I guess this may come as an unpopular opinion, but I love Locklands, and yes, it is in my list of favorite books this year. And the next on the list is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is the Dark Academia novel, the newest Dark Academia novel by R.F. Kuang. If you watch my updated video on my favorite standalone novels, you will also spot Babel on that video. And yes, I will have to mention it once more here because I love this book. I absolutely love Babel. I think this one somehow topped even the entire Poppy War trilogy. I love the entire Poppy War trilogy, but I think you can really see the improvement in writing from reading Babel. Plus, as a reader who have a fascination with etymology and languages, and of course translations, it will come to no surprise that Babel will become one of my favorite books. Next on the list at the number 8 spot is Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson. This is the first book and also the author's debut, the first book in the Illborn saga. And I think if you love character-driven fantasy novel, you really cannot go wrong with reading Illborn, especially if you're a reader who don't mind characters making super questionable decisions. And I want to make it clear that I do not support many of these characters' actions, but that's the point. one of the characters in this book is one of the most despicable main characters I've come across. But I cannot deny that this book is incredibly compelling despite that. And this is just speaking from my experience. I do not mind reading a book that is told through a perspective of an anti-hero or a villain. I think sometimes they make a narrative of a book compelling. And I really had a hard time putting Airborne down. I am so looking forward to reading I Dual Sin, the sequel to this book, next year. Once again, if you love reading a character-driven fantasy novel, I think you should try reading Airborne. Now at the number 7 spot, this is probably the most controversial book on this list, and it is The First Binding by R.R. Virdi. This is the first book in the Tales of Tremaine series, and ever since I posted my review for The First Binding, I have received so many weird and harsh comments, whether it's from haters who absolutely loathed The First Binding, or whether it's from the fans that absolutely defended this book. I received so many weird and really harsh comments. I have to be honest, in my 6 years of reviewing books, I have never felt as much anxiety as the result from reviewing The First Binding, unfortunately. Look, here's the thing, I have mentioned in my review that a lot of events in The First Binding are insanely reminiscent of The Name of the Wind. I never said that wasn't the case. I have mentioned that in my review, whether it's on Goodreads or also on my videos. But here's the thing, I as a reader do not mind if the first book of a series has many sections that were insanely similar to its inspiration. I know that many scenes in The First Binding can come off as plagiarism, and if you think that, I will not disagree with you. As I said, especially in the flashback scenes, so many moments in The First Binding are reminiscent of what happened to Kavod. Well, pretty much everything that happened to Kavod in the flashback scenes happened to Ari in The First Binding as well. But I, as someone who is a bit familiar with South Asian world building, I felt that there is still some originality and definitely some potential for the rest of the series to be different than the Kingkiller Chronicle. And also the present time frame in The First Binding has more progression than the one told in the Kingkiller Chronicle. So yeah, I love The First Binding despite all its similarities, even though I cannot deny that they can get a bit distracting to me on my first time reading through it as well, and probably even more on my second time reading through it. But I hope the second book will be more different than the Kingkiller Chronicle, and if that's really the case, I would be totally okay with The First Binding being similar to The Name of the Wind. And because I just mentioned the first book of a series being similar to its inspiration, the next book on the list is Priest of Crowns by Peter McLean. Now, the first book in this series, Priest of Bones, even though it was so good, it was so compelling and addictive, the first book is almost a pretty much scene-by-scene retelling of the first season of Peaky Blinders TV show. But it's better because I think the characters are so much more engaging and easy for me to get invested in. Not gonna lie though, I kept on thinking of the main character, the main narrator, Thomas Piety, as Thomas Shelby in Peaky Blinders. I cannot deny that, and that occurred throughout the entire series. But from my perspective, everything starting from the second book started to feel like its own thing. And out of the quartet, I love Priest of Lies and also Priest of Crowns the most. Priest of Crowns is the fourth and final book in the War for the Rosestone Quartet by Peter McLean, and I loved it. I think it has one of the most fitting conclusion to a series. And I know every time I talk about this series, I have always mentioned one of the main strengths of the War for the Rosestone is the distinct narration of Thomas Piety, and I have to repeat that again here because it's true. I have read so many books now. I've read so many fantasy books, and Thomas Piety is he has one of the most distinct narration in a fantasy book that I've come across. It really felt to me like Peter McLean, the author, is just the messenger for his story. And if you haven't read the series yet, and you are someone who are into grimdark fantasy series and also gangster fantasy series, you should definitely read War for the Rose Throne. And now we're entering the top 5 spot on this list, and at the number 5 spot, it is Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty. This is the first book in the Rag of Rita series, and it is, in my opinion, the best fantasy debut of this year. I love Sons of Darkness so much. It is a Mahabharata imbued with Malazan Book of the Fallen, A Song of Ice and Fire, and also The First Law. And just as a fun fact here, so far in my YouTube career, when it comes to video review, my review for Sons of Darkness has the most views. So it is not an exaggeration to say that Sons of Darkness is the best performing review on my YouTube so far. And I'm glad for it because I absolutely love Sons of Darkness. And because I'm mentioning Sons of Darkness on today's video, I just want to let you know, for those of you who ask me where you can get Sons of Darkness, right now the author is in the middle of maybe self-publishing Sons of Darkness, or maybe getting a new publisher to publish his book. And that's why it's a bit of a struggle right now to buy Sons of Darkness. Hopefully that situation will be remedied soon. We have only 4 books left on this list, and at the number 4 spot, it is Swan Song by Robert McCammon. I cannot believe that it took me this long to finally read Swan Song by Robert McCammon. It is hands down best post-apocalyptic novel that I've read. I think in a way you can actually consider this a fantasy novel based on the content of Swan Song. And I know that Swan Song has so often been compared to The Stand by Stephen King, and this comparison is kinda well deserved, but I personally think that Swan Song is better. Now when it comes to the level of characterizations, I think the level of characterizations in Swan Song matches the level of characterizations in The Stand by Stephen King. I never fault the characterizations in The Stand. My issue with The Stand lies with the ending, because I am disappointed with the ending of The Stand. I do not think the ending actually delivered a satisfying conclusion to the book. But Swan Song delivered what I wanted in this epic and huge post-apocalyptic tome. I have read only 2 novels by Robert McCammon so far, and both of them are so far a huge hit for me. Swan Song and Boy's Life are in my list of favorite standalone books of all time. And now moving on to the number 3 spot on this list, it is The Lonesome Crown by Brian Lee Durfee. And this book, as I mentioned in the introduction of this video, this book is the reason why it kept me this long to finally post this video, because it took me almost 2 weeks to read The Lonesome Crown. This is not to say that I do not enjoy reading this book or I felt bored by this book. That is not the case. Like, let's say The Fall of Babel by Josiah Bancroft last year. That book took me like 2 weeks or maybe even more to finish, but that was because I was bored with the book. That is not the case with The Lonesome Crown. The Lonesome Crown took me like 13 days to finish because I was just so busy this month, so busy, and I wish I had more time to read this amazing book, but now I finally finished it a few hours ago, and I have to say that it is an amazing conclusion. It is one of the most violent and grim fantasy books that I've read. So violent, and it contained one of the largest, maybe even the largest action sequences that I've read. And now I don't know the actual word count or maybe the page count here because I'm reading from an ebook, but the last 35% of this book, and this book is almost 1,100 pages long. The last 35% of this book, The Fiery Absolution, it was a massive war scene that lasted until the end of the book. A massive war scene filled with brutal carnage and also intense action sequences. It was so good. Everything that was established since the first book led to this point. And I think Brian Lee Durfee has successfully delivered a super satisfying conclusion with plenty of room for future sequels if Brian Lee Durfee someday decide to write them. But yeah, amazing conclusion, and also, as I constantly said, one of the most underrated fantasy series that I've read. And now we only have 2 books left on this list, and at the runner-up spot, it is The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 4th and final book in the second era of Mistborn, or Mistborn Wax and Wane, and I have done a full spoiler-free review on this book. And yes, well, I absolutely love The Lost Metal. It has the most Cosmere crossovers to ever exist in a Cosmere novel so far, and the characterizations, everything about this book, I loved it. Now, before The Lost Metal was published, I had fun reading the second era of Mistborn, but honestly speaking, I totally didn't expect that I would end up loving The Lost Metal this much. I love The Lost Metal as much as any installment in the first Mistborn trilogy, and that's saying a lot. The ending was just incredibly satisfying, emotional, and also bittersweet to me. And finishing The Lost Metal makes me so excited to read more future Cosmere books. So excited, especially after Brandon Sanderson said that many future Cosmere novels will have more Cosmere crossovers. And now we have finally arrived at the number 1 spot, and you might have guessed what this book is. And yes, it is still The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu, the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty series. Honestly, this is the year of Ken Liu and Dandelion Dynasty for me. I finished reading The Wall of Storms in the month of June, and it remains strong as my number 1 favorite books of the year. It is without a doubt a masterpiece. It has everything I want in a fantasy novel. The characters are just so lovable and also hateable for the antagonist. The pacing was utterly unputdownable, and the action sequences, oh my god, so many emotional moments, so many fist-pumping moments. The world building is insanely intricate, and the stakes of the narrative are constantly all-time high. It's just such an amazing book. The second book in the series is just absolutely amazing. As I said, this is the best second book of a series I've read since Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, and I don't think I can give a higher praise to a sequel than that. I cannot give a higher praise to a second book of a series higher than that. If you haven't read The Dandelion Dynasty yet, make sure to fix that as soon as possible. Now, The Wall of Storms is published in the year 2016, and some of you might be asking, what's the best book I read within this year that is also published this year? Well, the answer to that is simple. It is the fourth book in the Dandelion Dynasty series, Speaking Bones, the conclusion to the Dandelion Dynasty. Now, if you ask me what are the best series that I read this year, well, it is the Dandelion Dynasty. As I said, this is the year of Ken Liu and the Dandelion Dynasty. For me, I just love this series so much. And I can 100% say with utmost confidence that my books of the year are The Wall of Storms and Speaking Bones, if you're only counting books that are published this year. But my favorite book of the year is The Wall of Storms. Love this one so much. So yeah, that's it for today's video. That's all the best books that I read within this year. And this might be the last video I post this year. If possible, I want to post one more video before the end of the year, but we'll see. Even though there is a ranking to this list, it goes without saying that I recommend every book on today's video. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me today. Do let me know your thoughts on my list of favorite books. And of course, tell me what are the best books that you read in the year 2022. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.